this week I'm looking to build a few more bits of scatter terrain for my rural battlefields, my farm set. Now, you may remember, a few weeks back, I put a video out about making a pigsty, and in that I asked, if anybody got any suggestions for something else. And one of the replies I had was from John Clarkey, who suggested if he thought about doing something that includes doves, because the French like breeding doves. And to be honest, it's not one I'd thought of, and I thought, well, it's a great idea. I really ought to go with it. So I'm going to go through some of these bits that I've had hanging around and come up with some kind of dovecote arrangement for one piece of scatter terrain. And then another piece I want to do is like an outside grain drying store, if you like, or just somewhere where they tip the grain and cover it up to dry, because I wanted some more walls available in the farm environment. And then finally, just a couple of small pieces of scatter to put on the table. Right, so as I had this dovecote in mind, I knew I was going to have to make up my own version of a dovecote. But I thought, well, what can I utilise to go with it? And one of the things that I came up with was this kit by Warbases. And basically, I thought I could use this, it's obviously an old barn, as like the base for my dovecote, and then perhaps build something onto the roof. And then, with some of these other little bits and bobs that I've got hanging around, like this dog kennel, and I've got a dog left over from my Warbases Warlord animal sprue. I thought I could perhaps make some little bits of scatter with that as well. Now, it might be that, I might be able to include some bits of, things like bikes or ladder, whatever, with the dovecote. I don't know yet. I mean, that's something I've got to decide, that I've got a few things here that I want to use, and it's just a question of, which bits I'm going to put with which. So the first thing that I'm going to start with is my grain store. And so I've cut myself this piece of foam board as the base. And what I want to do is I want to use some walls to go around the edges of it. Now I've got this just one piece of plastic wall left in stock. So I thought what I'd do is cut my own out of this bit of scrap blue foam that I've got left over. And, I can draw a few bits out on here quite easily. As you can see, I've marked it out. Now, I could use a wire cutter with this, but I'm going to have a go at freehand cutting because, not everybody's got a wire cutter. So, and, with several small passes of the knife, you can cut it out reasonably well. But you'll soon be able to judge that for yourself. But anyway, I'll give this a crack and I'll come back to you. Right, so cut myself some lengths of wool. I would say they're fairly similar. The best my eyes can do, but hey ho. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to freehand copy the design off this wall or something similar to it. And I'm not going to, all I'm doing is use an ordinary pencil at the moment just to mark it in. And like I say, I'm going to do it freehand. I'm not going to try doing it exact, but I'm going to try something similar. All I'm doing is just basically pressing on a little bit to leave an indentation. It is a bit more long-winded doing this, but it's just satisfying sometimes to just do your own. I mean, what you could do if you don't trust yourself to stay in straight lines is you could actually, you know, lightly draw on some lines to follow. I'll just zoom in a bit and you can see it. Well, let me bring it up to you. And you can see what I'm doing. There's not going to be any exact science to it. All I'm actually going to do is follow the pattern over the top, and then that will make the first layer of bricks on this side. But I'm not going to bother to make sure each one matches exactly the other, because you're not going to notice that kind of detail, especially, you know, if you're a bit more subtle with the way you use it. But you do want those lines to at least look the same coming down, because they're the ones you're going to notice. Right, I'll get these done, because you don't want to be watching me doing this. It's fairly slow and boring. And I'll bring you back. And obviously, as you can hear, Lord Bob wants to go outside, so I'll also be letting Bob out before I bring you back. Right, so I've drawn out all my stone patterns on the brick walls. I wouldn't say they were the most handsome walls I've ever seen, but they are supposed to be out of, you know, hewn stone, aren't they, or something like that. So, and, you know, maybe I'll put this one up for them. But they'll be fine once they're painted over. You don't have to get too... I mean, I'm not looking... Although I've gone for a pretty brick standard type of pattern on it, they are going to be stone, not brick. And you don't have to be too precise. I mean, you get walls of all sorts. So the one compromise I did make is I decided to run a line down the middle so it was like a, you know, 2 courses thick. The reason for that being, I thought, I pity the poor 28mm figure that's got to pick a lump of stone up that big. So I thought, no, better make it look like it's possible. Anyway, all I'm going to do now is I'm just using the bit of a stone I've picked up in the garden, and I'm just running that over it to rough up the surface of some of the bricks and to make it, you know, look a little bit less uniform. And it just gives a little bit of a textured look to it. You don't have to get too mad, because I mean it is only blue foam, but you know, just something to make it look, you know, not like the stone's not perfect squares. I think I've done most of these now. Another thing you can do is like push some of the stones further in, you know, so you've got a little bit of depth thing going on as well, which you can do once you've outlined the individual bricks. You'll see that you can squeeze one further back than the others, and it just adds to the feeling of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just press out the rest of these, and then I'm going to position them on the base, and then I'll bring you back. Right, well, while the walls are setting on my grain store, I've been searching out some bits of old MDF. that I can use with my barn kit to make a dovecote for the roof. Here you can see that I'm cutting out the actual dove holes and mounting that on another piece of offcut, and then the base for it so I can attach it to the roof. And I've done it either side just to give it more balance, really. Now I'm just placing an extra strengthener in here so I can rest the roof on that part. And you can see it in place on that picture. Laying the roof pieces in place allowed me to trace and cut out the 4 end sections of the dovecote from balsa wood. Once I'd painted the inside and set it together, I decided to give all of it a coat of white before I go to the next stage. And I'm just basically accessing all the areas that are going to be difficult later on if I leave them. Once I'd got all these bits painted up, I decided to use the same technique as I did with the pigsty and use some corrugated paper to make the roof panels that I'll paint later on. Right, now that I've got everything in place on my dovecote, I had to give it a bit of a paint inside and out as I was building it. So the best way to show it you was through the photos, really. But now I've got it to this stage and I've put the barn coverings on. This one's more of a paint job now. I have cut a small base for it as well. I'm not going to add a great deal to its base, but I will dress it up a little bit. But for now, I'll leave that one to one side and I'll focus on this grain store or grain dryer area. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to glue this in place, because then that's going to take some time to dry, and then I can slowly start the painting job on this one as well. Right, so the first thing I've done is I've used some more of my sprue road to fill in the rest of it and then put the walls on top. And then what I've done is use some air drying clay with glue to fill in all the gaps. And these bits I'm just making to put in the actual grain piles. So I'm just giving them a coat of colour that'll stop any blue foam showing through whatever flock I use as grain. And there's one for the hay truck as well. Right, so this is all dried out now, and as you saw from the pictures, I've filled any edges that were showing. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to seal all of this in. I've mixed up some cheap craft grey paint with a bit of matte Mod Podge, and I'm just basically going to paint all of it now to seal it all in, and it'll also toughen up these blue foam walls. Right, let me get this done and then I'll bring you back. Right, so I've given that a complete coat now, so I'm just going to set that down to dry, and we'll look at the barn dovecote. I've not quite decided yet whether I'm going to use this as a something you can go in and out of, but just to give it an overall paint, I will be painting it. Right, let's get that started. As I say, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be using it as a cover as such, or whether I just use it as cover, as in hiding behind it. Because there's no windows, so there's little to be gained from putting the troops in there. So I don't know whether I could just seal it, I suppose. Right, that's inside and out. We'll just let that dry, and now I'm just gonna paint these few wooden parts on the roof that still show. There we go. So we can just leave that to dry now, and when we come back to it, I'm going to paint this with a gunmetal army painter, and then as I did with the pigsty, I'll be darkening that down with a dark wash to make it look a little bit more washed out. So while I'm waiting for things to dry, I made a wagon up from war bases and a base for it, and then I'm cutting some wire for the doves. As you can see, I've been busy on all the little add-on parts, including a tribute to Mike Robertson, one of my subscribers' dog, called Argyle. I hope I've caught his likeness, Mike. I'm not sure quite what he's doing on a French farm. Maybe he was left there during a British airborne raid. There's some more of my doves and a bike and a wheelbarrow that I've been doing. And I've also painted up the hay wagon now. And I've also used some gunmetal to paint up my corrugated roof. Here you can see that I've attached the wire to some flying doves that I'm going to try out. And I've based up the actual barn part now as well. So I added some of my soil to the oak, near the doorway. And I'm intending to grass it up as well at some point. And I've also prepared some little bases for the little scatter terrain. So that's what I've been busy with. Everything's painted up and everything's been given a wash. The walls for the grain store are dry now. So the next job is to get these dry brushed. Right, so first of all I'm going to give it a fairly heavy dry brush of some Castle Grey from Army Painter. Right, so now I've been applying some Dungeon Grey to just take it up to the next bit. You can see how it's gone over the original, but it's left traces of it behind. And it's just starting to kind of, avoid having a uniform colour, so you've got like where light's bouncing off it. You see on this wall that I've not started yet, the difference it'll make. You see that? You see how it's just lightening it up, but you can still see some of the other grey through it in places. Like I say, it's just avoiding, a kind of a monotone colour, because that tends to not look so realistic. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let that dry, and while that's drying, we'll start to have a look at these, which are going to go in there. So what I've been doing is looking for some flocks that I can use with these. Now I won't actually do it now because I'm going to wait for that to dry first and then stick these in and then apply it. But I found some that I made up myself, and then basically I put through a blender to get it a lot finer. And this one is like an ochre colour. So I think that'll work quite well. I'm thinking that maybe I'll use that as like one that's fresh from the field or whatever. And then I've got this other one I made that's a lot paler, more of a mustard colour. So I'll probably put that in the second compartment. And then the final one is basically, I think, I don't know whether you remember me saying I used to dry out my tea bags and dry out the tea and use that for ground cover. Well, I also like drinking green tea from time to time, and I also kept those and dried it out. So I'm going to use that as a totally different type of cereal for the third section of the grain store. Incidentally, I don't think Argyle would have appreciated it, but I'm going to use this in the dog bowls as well outside the kennel for his food. So they'll come in handy, and obviously these have cost me nothing. So that's one of the bonuses of making your own stuff, really, and recycling. Right, I'll get my desk cleared, wait for this to dry, and then we'll come back and start applying the grain. Right, as usual, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I forgot the lighter grey dry brush that I'm going to apply. Now with this one, I really am going to try and keep it, reasonably dry. I don't want to do overkill on this one. So I'm going to get it on the brush and then really wipe it off. Let's try that. I'll try brushing it downwards if I can on this one. Yeah, that's worked. Whether you can see on the end brick there, turn the light on it a bit. I'll do another one around here so you can see it. So that's before, and that's after. Can you see that? Do it one more time. That's before, and I'm just brushing down top to bottom, and it just catches all the edges of the bricks with a little bit of lighter colour, and that's what I'm aiming to do all the way around it. So I'll get that done, and then I really will set it to dry before we look at doing the grain store. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just paint some basing glue onto these mounds, because I want to get a few of the a bit of the flock on that I'm using as grain onto it as I stick it down, because I think it'll just be easier to make sure everything's covered. And I could always add a bit more once it's in place. Right, so let's get some of my flock. Use my other pin to lift this. Now I can sprinkle a bit more. Obviously I'll be sealing all this afterwards anyway, but I'll do them all at once because I think that'll be easier. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to do a few bits in front with the glue. Don't want it to look too pristine. Right, this is dried now. I did seal it and put another layer on, but you can see they've dried quite nicely. I just need to remove these pins that I was using to hold it down. I just want to show you another idea that I came up with when I thought about doing this. Now this is obviously supposed to represent grain. How I imagined it, that, you know, farmers would just put a sheet over that and then something to weigh it down. So what I've done is I snagged one of my wife's makeup wipes and washed it out, and then I painted it with some brown, a wet brown, and let that dry in the sun. And so what I did then, as you can see it's all creased up now, is I just screwed it all up, you know, to take the stiffness out of it, and then undo it again. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little sheet to stick down over the top. I'll let some of it poke out because I still want to see it. And the same with this one and the same with that one. And then the kind of weights I've seen on farms whenever I've walked by one tends to be an old tyre. And I thought that would give it more of an authentic look. So I raided the box that I keep. I think I've said it before, you know, when I go to a car boot or something, if there's any cars that are all battered or anything and, you know, they've got something missing, I'll pick them up for pence and then take the tyres off of them. And I use that in my modelling. So what I'm going to do first is cut a piece of sheet. Now I want to just make sure that I don't cut it wrong, because obviously I haven't made a lot of this. And I can just show you basically how I'm going to do it. Now what I want is some glue on this so it bonds down. Try this one first. a smaller tyre. What I will do is I'll probably soak that blanket a little bit once this has had time to set, just to make it hold down a bit more, but you can see the effect that I'm looking for. Right. So that's what it's looking like now. Put a bit of light on it so you can see it. I think that looks a bit more authentic like that. As I say, when this has had time to set, I'll probably introduce some very watered down PVA as well to help, you know, lower it down and stick it even firmer. Right, now I apologise for this, you're not going to see it very well, but I will bring it up to the camera. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick some of my flying doves in place, and then some of the actual seated doves as well. So I'm just dipping the end of this wire in the super glue, and what I've done is I've pre-drilled a little hole in the wood to stick it into. So it's going to look like that. Right, now I'm going to do one of the seated ones. That's it. I'll just put the other one in place and then I'll bring it up for you to see. There you go. So I've got my two flying doves and two just sat down. I might have more on that side yet, but I just want to make sure I've got enough for the other side as well. Right, let me get the rest in place and then I'll bring you back. Right, so that's all my doves are in place now. So as you can see, I've got a flying one here, and then on that side as well, and just a couple on there. And then I've got 3 seated on this side, and a couple more flying. I think it just gives it the feel of the duck. I hope it's done justice to the request for a dovecote anyway. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set them to dry and we'll move on to the next stage. So while I'm waiting for them to dry, I'm placing a few of the smaller additions, like these bottles and the bite that I painted up. Just adding Argyle's bowls now, and pasting some glue on the stack for the cart. And then what I'm using is the cuttings that you get when you're cutting a hayfield from a doormat to make it look like a stack of hay in the back of the cart. With that in place, I just seal it a bit with watered PVA and then sprinkle more on it. Right, well nearly everything's come together now. I've just got the final touch. And you can see now that I've given this a wash, it's toned it down quite a bit more. I don't know whether you noticed, but I've added a cat walking through there, and there's another cat there, look, asleep on top of that pile. So it's we're nearly there now really. All I've got to do now is look at putting the grass on. So I'm going to bring my tray in. I'm going to tip a little bit of this basing glue from Geek Gaming. Try not to get it onto the wall too much. Right. As I say, when this dries, I'll give it some watered down PVA to seal it in, and then put a little bit of loose scatter on top of that as well, just to fill in any spaces that it's missed. Right, I'll get the rest of these done and then I'll bring you back. Right, so that's the project complete. They are still wet because I've given them another soak with watered down PVA, but that should dry off in no time. It's already drying on that side, and I've just took the colour of these down a little bit and put a bit of dot wash on there as well to finish it off. So that's that one. This one's still very wet. That's just a little bit of scatter terrain just to bring any farm setup I do to life. We're having a few reasonable objects on there that would look in place. So I'll just let that dry. And put the light on him. Argyle's complete with his bowls and his kennel. And the converted barn with a dovecote. That's all complete now. Again, it's just drying with some watered down PVA. I did decide to kind of take much of the mud entrance back, and obviously once I'd put that initial grass down, I've then gone with two other shades just to make it look more realistic, because it was too bright with just the one shade. So I've gone with some rough pasture on there and some others as well. And then just added a few finishing touches like the bottles on the crate. Obviously you've seen the bike and the ladder and the cartwheel. But yeah, that's it complete, and that's probably going to be, I think, the last farm buildings I do for some time now. I think I've really lifted up the amount that I've got, so I'm quite pleased with what I've done so far. But I'll wrap this one up. Thanks for joining me. If you have liked it, please consider giving me a thumbs up or even subscribing. And if you've got any other comments you want to pass, just drop them down in the comments below. I always read them, and it's, you're a really good supportive bunch, and it really does, lift me no end. And I really do appreciate everyone that takes the time to make these comments, because it means a lot. So thanks for that. Anyway, I'll sign off and I'll leave you with some close-up photos so you can have a better look. And I'll see you again soon. Bye.